everybody. Thank you for joining
Hey, everybody.
me.
Hey, sir.
Hello.
It's WikiTree Day, and we are doing a panel today, a discussion panel on Italian maiden names. And we have Chris and Frank, that are project coordinators for the Italy project, and Danita and Christina that are joining us for this discussion. So I'm going to turn this over to you all and add your spreadsheet that you've put together.
Edgar?
All right. Yep.
I guess we're starting right away. We're just going to dive right into it. Hey, everybody. We are going to talk about the Italian maiden names. It's been like a real topic of discussion among the Italy project. And we've been talking about it. And then we know that the users of WikiTree, have also been talking about it because we've been saying, oh, you can't use a certain name because the person was born, lived, and died in Italy. And you're like, why is that? Well, today we have an answer to that. And as you've seen in the spreadsheet, we have a history of people using maiden names from as far back as we can go, actually, from on the civil birth records and on the certain religious documents too. And we're going to share several examples of this and why this is the way it is in Italy. So what do you say we get started and look at some records, right, guys?
Right.
Good. Okay.
All right.
I think it's really important to notice that in Italy, in northern Italy especially, I don't know, I'm a northern Italy person, so I don't know as much about the southern records, but we really didn't have civil records until post-Napoleon. Everything was just church records. That's all we could have. So you'll notice that on our little grid, there are no civil marriage records until we get into the Napoleonic era, and then you start getting civil records. Before that, all we really had to deal with were the church records. And as all of us here know, a lot of times it just depends on the priest or the scribe who's writing things down as to what we actually get. I had a period of time that prior to it, the women's maiden names were always listed. And then there was a chunk of time right in the middle where I guess this guy just didn't think it was important and he wouldn't put in the women's maiden names. And then afterwards they were back again. So, but the important thing to know is that in Italy, women, even today, women live their entire lives with one name. They live with their maiden name, and they may be called signora, and you might call them by their husband's names, but typically they don't even do that. I would be, I have a cousin. I'm an American, so I took my husband's name. So I'm a tough one to compare with. But I have a cousin named Rita Zanre, and the people always just call her Signora Zanre. They don't call her by her husband's name. She still today in the 21st century is always called by her maiden name. And so that's just an important fact for everybody to kind of catch on to.
Yeah, that's true, because I have my cousin's wife, second cousin's wife is Rosa, and she goes by her maiden name and not her what we would call married name, which would be Papatola. So yeah, she does not go by that. So when you send a letter to them, you have to go his full name and then her first and last name and send it like that, and don't use the married name, and that's about it. And it's been like this for literally centuries, actually, because like she said, like Danita said, we go to northern Italy, and things are the way they are there. But when you go down south, like where Calabria and Campania are, you tend to see, as you look at this chart, we have civil records all using the maiden names of the woman. It's from 1809 to the present. And when I was doing research for this, I saw places like Gesualdo, which is in Campania. It just goes from 1809 to 1920s, all maiden names. So you can't really argue with that. It's just the way things are in Italy. So.
Well, and then there's Sicily, which because Sicily always has to be different, and they are. So
you guys, you have to be difficult. It's just in your.
So they didn't start civil records until 1820, and you see in a lot of Sicilian civil records, at least through the middle of the 19th century, where women will be listed with both names. So a woman might be listed as Caterina Lazio in Scarantino. So listing her maiden name as well as the name of her husband. And we'll show an example like that. You see that also in some church records from the mid to late 1700s. It'll list both her birth surname as well as the surname of her husband. So everybody has to be different, especially in Sicily. So fun time.
Yeah, but things get a little interesting when you migrate, though, because if you have an ancestor who migrates to a country like the United States, for example, that is when someone would take the married name of their husband. I mean, I have, say, all right, my great-grandfather was Vincenzo Ferriolo, and he married a woman named Maria Tedesco. She wasn't known as Maria Ferriolo until she immigrated to America. That's when she would be Mrs. Ferriolo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in South America, the case was not so. Women kept their maiden name. I have an example for it's a Baptist record from 1879, I think. Where there is a lot of data about the parents and their nationalities, and the mother was Italian immigrant, and she is recorded with her maiden name, although the couple was married.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, as you can see, things get a little complicated throughout time. But if a person was born, lived, and died in Italy, that would be the name. There's no exception, really.
Right. In South America, in Argentina particularly, in social occasions, married ladies use their husband last name. But in records, in official records, the maiden name was almost always kept.
Exactly.
It makes it really easy, right? It's kind of a boon for genealogists to always be able to find a maiden name for a woman, because many times all we end up with in America is, George Manus married Mary. We never know Mary's name. She's just kind of lost because there's never any record
you might even
of her name.
it might not even get her first name. It's just Mrs. George Smith. It's like
Exactly. There's so many times when there are obituaries and things like that I look back, and even as late as the 1960s in the U.S., they would talk about, and her daughter, so and so's daughter, Mrs. George Smith, and you don't even know which daughter they're talking about unless you can go find a record of one of their children marrying a George Smith, and then you know that she is the person in that record. So it is very useful for genealogy to have all of these maiden names written everywhere. But there is also the situation where, like I mentioned, there were times when they weren't always writing down the woman's maiden name on, for example, their children's birth records and things like that. And just like in America, where many times you lose your identity, it would just be, Giuseppe Zanre and his wife, Sophia. And so who was Sophia? She had kind of lost her identity at that point in those records. So I really do appreciate the ones where we see that have so much very specific information. And it's really good, especially when someone marries two different Marias. First Maria dies and then there's another Maria. If we don't see another name pop up there somewhere, it's easy to assume that there was only one wife if you never found the marriage or death records of the first one. So having the maiden names on almost all Italian records is very useful.
Oh yeah, definitely. It makes research a lot easier, but sometimes though, even if you have a maiden name, sometimes it can be a little difficult, because if you go to a place like San Pietro or Maida, where a good chunk of my dad's paternal side's from, you're gonna see a lot of Caterina Petrusas, and can be tricky to find the right Caterina Petrus that's your Caterina Petrus, because that name can be really, really popular. So you have to be really careful. You can't just say, oh yeah, this is the right lady right there. Well, sometimes it might be, sometimes it might not. That's why you need to look at marriage records.
It's really complicated. I had a pair of couples. We have 3 little villages that I work on the records a lot here, where I live in Italy, and one is San Vincenzo and one is Valdena, and people do migrate back and forth between them sometimes. But I had one couple that I thought was that couple, and it wasn't until they started having children like 2 or 3 months apart that I realized they couldn't be the same couple, but it was the same man and the same woman as far as their first and last names, but one lived in Valdena, the other lived in San Vincenzo. So I was eventually able to untangle them all, but even the same husband and wife name were exactly the same, and it was really kind of interesting. The town that we live in Italy is my husband's paternal home, right? His father's home. And many people migrated from there to Great Britain in the early 1900s, but many of them came back. So some of the interesting things you see in the cemeteries, for example, is that a woman will be listed as with her husband's married name, and then it will have a birth name underneath it, because she had been known in Great Britain as her husband's name, and when they came back to Italy, that stuck, right? And so even though most people, as you said, Chris, who were born, lived, and died in Italy would never have changed their name, we even have some people in our local cemeteries that the woman has her husband's married name simply because she had been known that for a long time in Great Britain. And when they moved back to Italy, she never went back to her maiden name, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think I've only had like one instance of somebody actually moving back to San Pietro, and it was a guy, so that doesn't really count, obviously. So
I have another nice example. This is a census record for Mantua in the mid 1800s. And as you can see, all the women are, the first 2 persons in the record are a couple, married couple, and the lady is named with her maiden name, but also all the mothers, because the parents for each person are named, all the mothers are also with her their maiden names, and this is for me was a very useful source of information. And this was the way they were kept, in at least in big cities in the 1800s. Unfortunately, not all the records are online yet.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of
that's
those
right.
too, and they're really useful for being able to tie families together, is to figure
Yes.
out what that is really the family I'm looking for.
There is a lot of information about them, this kind of documentation.
I just wish my towns in Calabria and Campania had a census like this. That would be really helpful. But
In church,
yeah.
In church records, on the other hand, not always the maiden names are kept. I have found church census records from this same time frame where the maiden names are not recorded for the ladies.
So this is one of the reasons why we don't use that current last name field a lot when we're dealing with Italian names, is because even though, Maria Zanre is married to Giuseppe Giulianati, her current last name isn't Giulianati. Her current last name is still Zanre. So a lot of times people will think they're being helpful and come in and update that. And even, quite honestly, even WikiTree will give us hints that there's a problem sometime that, there's there's a marriage, there's a marriage record, but the last name isn't changed. And we're like, yeah, we know. We know the last name isn't supposed to be changed.
Yeah. I rarely get that error, to be honest with you. But if I do, I just kind of like just ignore it.
Well,
Whatever.
if you work with GEDCOMs like I do, the GEDCOM cleaner, the ACG or AGC, I can't remember which way it goes. It will automatically, there's a setting in it to say if there's a marriage record, change the maiden name to the married name. I try to do my US records in a batch and then do my Italian records in a batch. And I have to remember to go to change it because it wants to fix everything for me. I want it to fix it in the United States. I don't want it to fix it in Italy. So I actually have to go in and flip the settings when I know I'm working on a batch of Italian GEDCOM records so that they won't get updated with the current last name field because it wants to be helpful. But you have to realize that if you're dealing with multiple cultures, you really need to be on top of what you have your settings for these kind of great tools too, that you're not stepping on yourself by using a setting that doesn't work right in the location you're in.
Yeah, and so that's why we have our name field guidelines set up for the project, set up like the rest of WikiTree generally works. And so we're using the convention of where people lived at the time that they lived. And so, in general, for people who were born and lived their entire life in Italy, they're not that the women will not have changed their names. They'll keep that surname they were born with from the day they were born till the day they die, and even years after, when they're mentioned on the like the death records of their children, perhaps, or the marriage records of their children. It's always going to be referencing birth name, birth name, birth name, birth name.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And just to show that we're not really blowing smoke or anything, we could show some documents. I have a document all ready to go. You guys want me to share my screen?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
All right, let me set my screen. Share screen. Oh, crud. All right, screen showing up. All right, hold on a second here. All right, share screen. You guys. All right, share my screen. Yeah, there we go. All right, here we go. You guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, you guys are looking at a first. Well, you're looking at the births from the town of Carbs. He was born in, let's see, zoom in. Born Judge Waldo in the 1880s, and you can see his parents right here. Let's see, Vincenzo Carabas right here. That's his father, age 30, blah, blah, blah. And you see his mother, Anna Capobianco. See, that's the mother, and that's also her maiden name right there. It wouldn't be Anna Carabas. So, yeah.
I think where you really see the differentiation. I mean, many cultures, they will, on a birth record of their children, they will show the mother's full name if they can. But where you really see the differentiation is in a death record.
Forward, don't you think?
Yeah.
Over here you have marriage. Over here to Clementina. Yeah. All right. So, like Italian documents, just say it like that. I mean, I could show you every single document I have, but.
If you like, I have a death record for an Italian lady in Brazil where she's buried under her maiden name, but the husband is also mentioned.
Yeah. Put that on the big screen here.
Yes, I'm doing just that. Right? Can you read it here, Rosa Rossi?
Yeah.
If I can. Right. And Rosie was her maiden name, and here it states that she died in 1900, and so I don't I don't know much Portuguese, but I manage. And her husband was this guy Antonio Navil, but she is record under her maiden name in Brazil.
That's good. I can show you a lady that immigrated from San Pietro to Haverhill, Massachusetts, real quick. Let me see. Trying to share screen. All right, hold on. And this is when someone did I show my desktop? Really? Hold on. Entire screen. Try that. All right, you guys can see my screen?
Yep.
All right. This is a naturalization paper for someone who was born in Italy, but she immigrated to Haverhill, Massachusetts. And as you can see, she has her married name. So it just shows that when people immigrated from Massachusetts, from San Pietro to Haverhill, they just changed their names. And as you can see, it has her husband's listed here, her birthplace, all the children born and lived in Haverhill in Italy. So that's pretty much it. So.
So the only time I use the last name at birth being it different for obviously if they live in another country, that's one. But if they were born, lived, and died in Italy, the only time I ever use the last name the current last name field is if I just don't know their name. And I guess I could put it in the other last names, but I just feel like it's easier for people to see if they're looking for Giuseppe Ferrari's wife, Maria, if it says Maria and then unknown for her real name and then Ferrari for her current last name, that helps people find her better. But generally speaking, we don't use the current last name at all for someone who born, lived, and died in Italy, because they would not have changed their name at all.
Yep. That's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, wish we could have people asking questions, but this is recorded, so I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add other than the obvious.
Just on my part, a reminder that when people move from country to country, sometimes the Baptist name, the given names were also changed. From Italian to the equivalent in the country where they arrived. And that is a very important thing to remember when you are searching for your ancestors.
Yeah.
That even if, for instance, in Argentina, someone was known as Jose, for instance, it was Giovanni in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
In Italy, and that's a big difference when you look for the records.
Yeah. It's also important to keep in mind that I've been going through the civic records, not like so much the church records, because church records for San Pietro and Gesualdo are not online. They could say something else, but by and large, like if you look at something like the Pozzacetti of both of those towns, you will find the maiden names as well. So sometimes the church record is also in Latin too, so you have to take that into account when you're looking at these things. So,
speaking of Latin, up on the screen, here we go. Here's Sicily being different. So this is
Sicily
church record, well, an extract of a church record in marriage Processetti from 1824, a death in 1814, and it is the death record of Agata Lazio, which is her husband's surname, Espicuzza, which is her surname of birth, wife of deceased Cayetano or Gaetano Lazio, daughter of Tommaso, in here it's Latin, so it's Tomei, and Geronima or Girolama Spicuzza et Scarpace. So you have both surnames of both parents here. So again, fun times in Sicily. But
It's fun learning. It's fun having to dig through Latin records. And I have records in my town that go back to the 1500s. And they are interestingly not in Latin. They are in Italian, maybe tinged with local dialect. I don't know.
Sure.
but they are, but you know, a lot of times people will, oh, this is kind of an interesting thing while we're talking about names. It doesn't have specifically to do with maiden names. But a lot of times people will look at a Latin church record of their ancestor and say, his name was Joseph. His name was never Joseph. Joseph is Latin for Giuseppe. His name never was Joseph. So even though you see it written out Joseph in a Latin church record, he's not going to be a Joseph. You know, that would be written the same way in Germany, for example. Germany would write it with a PH, but Joseph in German is with an F. So just because you see it in a church record doesn't mean that was your ancestor's real name if it's Latinized, because they never would have been known as Joseph.
yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And if you go a little off topic here, you know,
You can find also northern Italy in the Napoleon era, especially in Piemonte and such regions. The records are in French, which is a further complication.
Yeah. Well, just goes to show that the Italian peninsula has had its share of complications ever since the fall of Rome. So there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Italy was never Italy until it was Italy.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
And even then, it's just, well, that's another video altogether.
Yeah. So this is so going back to Danita's point that it varied from priest to priest. And this is a State delle Anime, a church census from 1698 of one of my ancestors, and Santoro is the surname. You see all the Santoros here, and then the wife of one of the children down here listed, with her surname, Antonio Fumai. Promise you that's what that says, even though it's kind of hard to tell. But if you step forward, later in that year, and they are taking, let's see, go to the next one here. Yeah, another family.
Mm-hmm.
Everything Santoro. And really, they don't even give you surnames after the heads of the household. It's just like, who is it? Yeah, sister, brother, son, So, again, priest to priest, depends on the time of day, phase of the moon, good times in church records.
And see, got into the sacramental wine,
Our name is Zan in northern Italy is Johnny, right? And I found a record where Zanre is spelled Gianre in one of the records. So Janre. So it's it just depends. Like you say, it depends church to church, priest to priest, and record to record. You may find the names spelled very interestingly. And I always keep a note of the interesting names, but I know that ultimately what the name really is, right? So you just have to, but if someone had only ever found that one record for their family, they would have thought that their name was Janre,
right?
Not Zanre,
yeah. I mean, and that's kind of like a little bit of a sidebar to this conversation, but just, the fact that, the standardization of the spelling of these surnames was really fluid, in some cases, even into, the early 1900s. And I was like, is it spelled with an A or with an O? Well, it depends on what day of the week and what the scribe heard, because most people in that time were not literate, so they couldn't spell. And scribes, scribes decide, well, this is what I heard, this is what I'm putting. And so there's a lot of give and take between like the letters B and P. B as in boy, P as in play, and you see the same surname rendered two different ways depending on how they heard it and just what the usage kind of evolved into eventually. So
yeah, I mean, I've had how many ways can you spell my last name? Feriolo. Even here, it's just like off the wall. I mean, even San Pietro, it's just like there's an I here, there's an extra J. I'm like, what's going on here? So it's just like,
Yes, I have a branch with the last name Parmigiani from Parma, and it for the same person in different stage of his life, he was spelled with WG in the middle, with only one S, with E or with an I in the middle. At least I counted 4 or 5 spellings of the same name of the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for the longest time, I got mail that was addressed to Fred Sanford, but I think that's kind of going beyond the pale.
Well, when I was first doing this, when I first started really researching my husband's family, and I didn't know half of these names that were in, because I wasn't from that area, so I didn't know half of the names that were the church. I went and got a number of different phone books from the area, from as far back as I could find them to current, and I would look through the phone books to try to find a current name that was, how did it end up? How did this name end up, right? And unfortunately, we have both Delanza and Delanzo. So it's really hard for me to tell which one came from where. And also, we have a really interesting family named Cacchiole, and with a CH, right? Someone dropped the H somewhere, and there's also a branch of the name Cacchiole. So they can all be traced back to the same person, but somewhere along the way, a total different pronunciation and an H got dropped out of the name. So it is kind of interesting. You can't even look at current modern spelling and know that you've got what you thought you had when you're looking back. That's for sure.
I guess Frank had to go. But
Frank had to go.
Yeah, Frank had to go. All the 3 of us here, and just we have different last name too. For you can't really spell Tedesco in different ways either. The Todesco and Tedesco. I went to school with a lady whose last name was Todesco, so I've been meaning to ask her if she had Tedesco in her family tree, just to ask, But that's a really common last name in Italy.
Yep.
Well, it looks like we're going back to the big screen here. So, well, I don't know if we have anything more to add other than just talking back and forth like we've been doing. But,
I just think the most important thing about the maiden names, really what we were here to talk about the most, is that don't try to help. Don't try to help on an Italian record if you think someone has missed the putting in the current last name, because if it's not there, it's probably because we intended it not to be there. Just look at the Italian name guidelines before you make those kinds of changes, and also moving people's middle names into breaking up a first name and putting it into the middle name field, because they all belong in the first name. So, we appreciate all of the wonderful help that we get. We're all here to help each other. But if you're dealing with Italian records, just kind of keep in mind that there are some specific naming guidelines that we have to follow. And we will not put anything in the current last name unless there's a really good reason for it.
Right, such as immigration, obviously. And we don't want to come down hard on anybody. I mean, we're here
we love to help. We love to help.
Of course.
We're just saying, as a rule, we don't want to come down on anybody, being on anyone's parade. We just want to state our case here for the people of WikiTree and everybody watching at home.
It's great.
So, I think Adra is coming back, and I think she's here to tell us to stop talking.
No, not at all. No, I was just going to say, so just a general rule of thumb is just don't put anything in that current last name field. Just to default to thinking if it's an Italian person, they lived their whole life in Italy, just leave it like it is. Don't try to
the same
to it.
And the same actually also applies to the person's first name. Someone born in Italy is not going to be named John. His name is going to be Giovanni.
Yeah.
Or Gianni, right?
And just like other projects, there are other projects that kind of have the same type of guidelines, and they'll have their own project name field guidelines. So if there's a question in your mind about whether something should be a certain way, you can always go out and search the help pages for that, or check the Italy project page. There's a link right there.
Or you can
Take
contact
you right
one
to
of
it.
us in the Italy project, and we'll be happy to help you.
Yeah.
Always.
Yes.
Great.
All right. Did you guys want to share any more examples, or are you ready to?
Well, I think we're just about ready to wrap up. I already showed my examples, and I don't think I can get Family Search to load again. Or Antonati's been acting weird today, but hopefully by the time this airs, you can go to Antonati itself and check out various documents provided by the website, and just look for yourself. If you have any questions, always leave a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you guys in the next video. Yes.
Great.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll check you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.